This is part 2 of our conversation with Fred Runner, all about his philosophy of sound and his extensive experience in the movies. You know a lot about history, you know a lot about trains, but also a sound man, and an accomplished one at that. Let's see, I have a list of some of the movies that you have worked on, starting back in your earlier part of your career, The Right Stuff, then Horse Whisperer, Matrix Reloaded, Batman Begins, Rescue Dawn, Pursuit of Happiness. These are some really exciting projects. How has your love or your appreciation of sound deepened over your experiences? And have you developed a philosophy from your experience about how sound influences our lives?
Sound is, first off, I've been really lucky to do what I've done. I've been able to go places and meet people that few people get a chance to. But to record sound and then also be able to see how sound affects people, it's this wonderful place that most people don't understand. It's a thing that affects our emotions in ways that aren't exactly concrete. I've been fortunate enough to meet some people that have some really extraordinary ideas, philosophical ideas about sound. A man who lives out in Bolinas, Walter Murch, makes a great metaphor of sound being a place where the puppeteer hides so he can pull the strings of your emotions from the soundtrack, using music that tells us how we should feel, if we should feel excited or sad or anxious. Those things can come from music, but they can also come from sound effects too. And when I worked on The Right Stuff, working in editorial, that was the first time I became aware of the power of sound effects besides music to affect how we feel as we watch something, and we're really unaware of it. You know, if you've got a hot, dry wind, makes you feel more parched than if you just have any old wind at all. Rain can sound light and gentle. It can sound heavy and with lots of spatter to it. All those things will affect the overall tone of the scene and how you relate to the scene, and sometimes how you empathize with who's on the screen. When the guys I was working with on Right Stuff said, I overheard them saying that they needed to find a happy wind. And that thought struck me as funny at first, and then it suddenly occurred to me that there's actually an emotional content in those sounds. And the film, of course, went on to win Academy Awards for best sound mixing and best sound editing that year, and it was wonderful to work on that show. The people that I was working with had all worked on Apocalypse. Many of them had worked on Star Wars. You couldn't have had a better place to begin to learn about the soundtrack.
And what I'm hearing you say is that sound connects us to our emotions.
Absolutely.
And you've had a lot of storytelling experience in doing that.
There you go. Another thing Walter Murch points out is that there's a sort of literal truth to visual things. They come in through the front door. Things that you see with your eyes are perceived very literally, whereas the things you hear come in through the side door and affect us in very non-linear, non-literal ways, in an emotional way.
You have created an interesting life. Your enthusiasm is really sincere. You seem to be very authentically happy.
I've just found that simple things usually are the best. I hope that makes some sense. The sound of the wind in the trees is very soothing. If you get a chance to be alone and quiet with your thoughts a little bit, you can figure things out that you couldn't figure out with the rat race going on. It's been nice to know that the best things in life are things that you, at the risk of sounding like a cliche, things that you can't buy. A serene walk on a trail or a reflective time in the trees is something that doesn't really cost anything at all, but it can pay extraordinary rewards.
Well, thank you so much, Fred, for a wonderful conversation.
You were very welcome, Gina. It's been my pleasure.
Discover more about your place among the wild things. Support creative artists like Fred Runner, and do buy his new book, Mount Tamalpais Scenic Railway, by Arcadia Publishing, coming out soon. Experience, explore, connect. I'm Gina Farr. Thanks for listening. This conversation is a feature of WildSoundStories.com.